Should you have an online portfolio showcasing your skills and abilities, and will that help you get a job? Well, I got an online portfolio. I've had one for years, but I also know that people don't look at it. People often don't even look at my LinkedIn profile. I'm not even sure whether people have read my CV when I'm applying for jobs. So it really depends on the recruitment process. Portfolio can help for certain areas, and we'll cover those. But if I'm recruiting, and if you have a portfolio and a profile, then I will have looked at it. And if someone's looking at it, it better be good. So let's get started. When we're doing job hunting, does a portfolio of examples help? When people are asking the question, I need to get a profile for my software testing, or I need to get a profile for my software development, what I think they're really focused in on is a GitHub profile and a set of repositories that showcase their skills. And if that's the case, most programmers and testers don't have one. If you look at anyone's GitHub repository, chances are they've got 2 or 3 repos when they were trying to learn a language, possibly when they're at university. They may not do a lot of coding in their spare time. Particularly if people are in testing, they find it hard to showcase their work because they're writing exploratory testing charters, they're writing notes about their testing. They don't always make that public. People don't practice testing in a way that allows them to make a lot of notes. If you're doing automating for practice, chances are it's a learning project and isn't very good in your portfolio. We'll make a distinction about that later on. But most people do not have an online portfolio. So that means that if you do have one, you're in, a 1%. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the top 1%, because if you've got a portfolio and it's bad, it might put interviewers off. If you've got a learning project and you've been copying someone on YouTube and it's showing you how to use WebDriver and everything is written as a main class, when people look at that, they're going to go, this person doesn't know what they're doing. So portfolio has to work for you. So we'll cover tips on how to do that. Some skills do not really need a portfolio. When I'm seeing people talk about this online, they're talking about, well, if you're in testing, you can write defects and you can put those in a portfolio in a GitHub repo. There are some skills that we will check during an interview. We will assume that you have them. Writing defects, writing test cases, scripts, creating test plans and strategies, creating architecture diagrams, writing user stories and acceptance criteria. We'll assume probably that you know how to do that, or we will check it in an interview. It's not the kind of thing that you really want to showcase. What you want to showcase is something that makes you different, a reason why someone would pick you up as opposed to someone else. Now, if you've got opinions or case studies, then they're probably better off in a blog or in a video and not a GitHub repo. You might want to put them in a GitHub repo as well, simply because you've got then a central place to store them. If you don't have a website or you don't have a blog, chances are you should probably get one of those first before you start on a GitHub profile. So say you just have LinkedIn, you could use the articles feature to write opinion pieces and case studies, and you might choose to copy that text and put it in a GitHub repo. So you've got a central source for articles, then you could start repurposing them. But that could just as easily be a private repo. It doesn't need to be public because you're using LinkedIn as your thought leadership portfolio. So let's look at GitHub, because that's really what people are talking about most of the time when they say, I want a portfolio. So with your GitHub profile, treat it like your LinkedIn profile. So you put in your photo, you put in a description of yourself, you add your social links, treat it like a LinkedIn profile. At this point, if you've done that, chances are you're already in the 1% of GitHub users, because most people don't put that information in. It's just a GitHub account, they put some personal projects up, and that's it. They don't even promote it as part of their job hunting. So you've got a profile now. The next thing to do is to use the profile README. Most of the time when you look at someone's GitHub profile, you will see that they have a list of repositories, but there's nothing about them except a little description. You can add a README onto your GitHub profile that describes who you are. It's a markdown file where you can embed HTML. And that will be shown when someone visits your profile, and the list of repositories will be underneath that. That's a way of customizing your profile. If you do that, You're in top 1% of GitHub users because most people don't do that. And that alone could elevate your GitHub profile into being more of a portfolio. So you could stop there and you'll have a profile that's more advanced than most people. But what we really want to do, I guess, is get some repositories that help you showcase what you're doing. Now, when I'm looking at someone's profile, because they've mentioned it in their CV, when I'm looking at the list of repositories, I only want to see sources. I don't want to see forks. So I will filter that list for sources, because I think a lot of the time when people are learning how to use GitHub and they're looking at someone else's code, they will fork that repo so they can have a look at it. You only really need to fork the repo if you're going to do pull requests and contribute to that. So I would typically delete any forks unless you're actively working on one of those other projects. What you want is a list of unique repos to you, sources that you have created that help showcase. Because if you clutter up your repo list with forks, some people might not filter it. So all they see is a list of stuff and then they don't know what you're working on or what you're doing. Because you can't guarantee that the recruitment person is going to know how to look at GitHub and see your repos unless you point them out. So in general, if you're creating a repository for code, then it needs to be professional. Even for personal projects or learning projects. For Java, you don't commit the compiled classes. For Python, you don't commit the modules. For JavaScript, TypeScript, you don't commit the modules. Don't commit your IDE folders, your .idea and your .vs code. Use the GitHub ignore file, the .gitignore file, to exclude those directories from your repo, because otherwise it makes it look like you don't know what you're doing. Do run static analysis tools on your code to get them as good as you can as easily as possible, because chances are if you're working in GitHub and it's a personal project, you don't have anyone reviewing your code. So simple mistakes will slip through. So you need to remove as much of that as possible to give a good impression. Add unit tests as much as possible. Because again, it shows that you know what you're doing and you're treating it professionally. You need to have a good README on that repository. One thing not to do, which I've seen quite a lot, because when I'm working on a project, a personal project, I'll go and look on GitHub and see if anyone's done anything similar. Do I even need to create this project? And I'll see things that look like they're similar, and I'll go into that repo and have a look, and there's a README, and I'll look at the README and it says that this tool is going to save the world and solve every problem. And you go, that's amazing. Then you look in the source and there's none. All they've done is spent all that time in a README. Don't do that. Like, your README should describe what you've done, how to install and run the application, why this project even exists. Put in your known limitations for this project, particularly if it's a showcase project. Explain why you didn't add unit tests. Explain why it didn't go to this extent and put in these particular features because you were focused on these other things. Explain the project to people so that they don't make assumptions when reading it. Because if I look at a project and it's badly written and there's nothing in the README, I'm going to make a lot of assumptions, and the assumptions are usually going to be bad. The more that we put out there, the more you can be judged. So you put out the stuff that you want to be judged on, and you help people understand how they are supposed to judge it and review it. And if it's a personal project or a learning project, describe the process you went through and the lessons that you learned. Just use it as another vehicle for sales, that you can communicate your learning, that you can share what you've done. One really important thing is it needs to work. You can use GitHub Actions to actually run your code and run the unit tests. And that also shows that you know how to use GitHub a little bit more. So use the features in there. This is all important if it's code. If you're using it to have text, and I have GitHub repos that are all text because I'm doing experiments with AI and I'm writing up case studies of those experiments and I'm putting those in the GitHub repo. There's very little code there. It's all text, so it's all written in Markdown. It's all written as readme.md, so it's easy to see in the GitHub repo. You can make repositories work as pure text if that's the kind of portfolio you want to create. So I do in my head make a distinction between personal projects, learning repositories, and portfolio repositories. So make it clear in the README what it is. A learning repository is typically when you are trying to learn a new tool or a new skill or a new programming language. That can be a bit scrappy. It may not have unit tests. Chances are it's got stuff that isn't very good because it's what you're using to learn. But what you can do is explain your learning process. You can explain what you have learned, what you went through as the process. You could link off to resources that helped you, and that can help other people regardless. Someone wants to learn Go, they could look at your Go learning project, see the resources you used, and go and follow along with those. But make it clear that it's a learning project and isn't to the same standard that your professional portfolio or personal projects would be. So it can be a bit scrappy. A personal project, typically I would view as a hobby project, and I wouldn't necessarily judge it in the same way as a professional portfolio project. So it might not have unit tests, but I'd expect it to work. It's probably there to do a kind of novel thing that other tools don't do. So then it might give me some insight into you as a person or your interests. But again, that should be clear in the README. And you can also put in all the to-dos that you've still got to carry out on it. So it's a project that you're working on. So I think I don't worry too much about personal repos. If it's a learning repo, they're quite good to tell people what you're interested in and what you want to do next. And they're also quite good if you're starting to do interviews with people and they're using tools and languages that you don't have. You can demonstrate that you're learning it. It's not necessarily a portfolio project because you haven't mastered it yet, so you're not showing off your skill set. What you're doing is you're saying, I am learning this. Here's the process I'm going through. And it shows that interest and that career development moving forward. That can be very useful if you're trying to change careers or you're trying to get a new role. So you're moving from exploratory testing into trying to do more test automation, then create some learning repos for that. If you want to use a different language, you want to work in AI and don't know Python, so you're learning Python because you want to get more work with AI companies. Whatever it is you're trying to move into, that can be quite useful. When I was trying to do more DevRel and marketing, my portfolio wasn't really a code portfolio. It was all the YouTube videos, all the blogs. So you have this whole content portfolio that you can draw on. It doesn't have to be just GitHub repos, but GitHub repos don't just have to be code. So a portfolio repo is different. Portfolio repo is something that you're putting out as a showcase, which is as good as you can get it because it is showing off your skills and it is something you want to be judged on. You could adopt an approach that I haven't seen many people use, which is you make them public when you're job hunting and then private when you're not. That's what we do with our CVs. We get our CV up to date. We tailor it for the job. We make sure there's no spelling mistakes. If we have portfolio projects, we would keep them up to date, make sure they're using the right libraries, use any new programming constructs that are available in the programming language, make sure they work, make sure they've got good documentation, just that they represent the skill set that we are trying to be hired for at the level that we're trying to be hired for. That's the job for portfolio project. Then once you've got a job, you make it private again because over time the repo is going to degrade. And a portfolio project may not help other people. It's not like a learning project where you're going to put in your resources. A portfolio project says, I know how to do this, therefore judge me on the work here. A learning project is, I learned from these other people. Or it might be a tutorial project where you're giving other people the resources and examples. That's slightly different from portfolio, unless you're trying to do DevRel, in which case a learning project, a tutorial project could well be a DevRel style project, but it will have more examples and it will have more instructions. So the message really there is you have to consider what you're trying to communicate with this project. What do you want the viewer to think when they see it? Because a portfolio is a sales tool. Personal projects are for your personal development. Learning projects are for your professional development. Portfolio is there for you as a sales tool to help you get a new role. So with a portfolio project, we want to be really focused. We want to know what we want to showcase and why. We're creating this for the aim of getting a job, of showing our skills, trying to move into a different role. This is a set of content that you have already mastered and you're demonstrating mastery in it. You're showing off, you're selling your skills. Hopefully, with your portfolio project, you never have to do one of those coding tests again. But you will. undoubtedly, because people use them in recruitment all the time. You would hope you would never have to do a leak code problem ever again, but you will, guaranteed. I actually have a leak code repo where I was trying to use it to learn leak code, but I was also using it to demonstrate unit testing around the leak code problems and abstraction layers and trying to do them in a good coding style rather than just a leak code quick hack to solve problem. So I had a slightly different aim around that particular profile. So with a portfolio project, know what you want to showcase and why. Only build what you need, because you want people to look at this and read it and understand it. If you want to showcase your skills with an automation tool like WebDriver or Playwright, you're not going to create a full coverage of the application under test, because what you want to showcase is that you understand how to use that particular tool, that you know how to create abstraction layers well, that you know how to create a right project structure. You want it to be small enough that someone can grok all that and understand it and see that you're capable of it. So it's not necessarily huge, it's focused. If you want to showcase some test automation, build the automation against an app that already exists. Don't build the app and then write the test for it, because chances are you won't finish the app and you won't actually write any tests. What we want to do is showcase the skill and make it as easy for ourselves to do that. There are lists of applications you can use. Butch Mayhew has an awesome list on GitHub, one of those awesome lists of applications to test. I'll add a link in the show notes. I've got a list on my test pages and another one on my API challenges. There are lots of existing applications out there. If you're doing a programming project, pick a smaller app. Don't try and create a massive app that does everything. Create a very focused application that helps you demonstrate the features of whatever library or framework that you're attempting to sell your skill in. I don't necessarily think the application has to be pretty. Unless it's a front-end project, then make it pretty. If it's a back-end project, the code needs to be pretty. The code needs to be well structured. The project needs to look good. You're showing a particular framework, and the more you put in there, the more distracting it becomes for the reviewer, and possibly they start looking at the wrong thing. If you want to demonstrate your Spring Boot skills and you've got an incredibly pretty front end, then that's detracting from the Spring usage, and then people will start finding flaws in your front end. But if you deliberately say, I'm focused on Spring, and I want you to look at how I'm wiring all this together and how I'm using this particular construct in here to do the error handling on the API requests, then you don't necessarily need to put as much into the front end. You don't need to clutter that review process. We need to be really focused because we're creating a sales tool, something that people can look at and understand and see our skills in there. Also remember that it's a portfolio project that you will probably want to use again, and you will need to keep it up to date and you will need to maintain it in the future. So don't make it a maintenance headache. Don't make it too big. Don't clutter it up with frameworks that you don't need. Demonstrate that you know how to create something small and focused and targeted and solve a problem, because that's one of the skills that we require from professional developers. Showcase that as part of building the actual showcase product. And it better show you at your best. So have unit tests in there, have well refactored code. It should build cleanly. There should be no errors in there. But in the README, document what you've done, what it showcases, what the known limits are, what you chose not to do and why you chose to do that. Describe it well in the README, because remember, this is a sales pitch. And your README then should be a sales pitch to link off to your LinkedIn profile and your blog or whatever else you got. Every GitHub repo is a chance to have backlinks from a README file to somewhere else. You're creating a content web with all this stuff. It's part of your bigger online presence and profile. Now, the next step is the missing step that people often don't do. You've created a portfolio showcase project, so now you have to promote it. So you add it to your LinkedIn profile as a repo and as a featured project and you might create an article about it and post about it because it's part of your wider portfolio and you have to draw attention to it because it's part of your sales process. If you're actively looking for a job, then you might want to periodically update it and say, hey, I've just added this to my showcase. And then it gives you a chance to re-promote it and re-promote it with something new and demonstrate that you're still advancing and moving on and keep drawing attention because your portfolio project is there to help you get a specific role that you're job hunting for. So you're selling yourself into that role. It's not just the project itself, it's how you use it and promote with it. Keep updating it periodically so then it shows at the top of your list of repos. All of these things about recency and keeping things up to date demonstrate that you are using it as a portfolio project. You want it to be read and judged, and it's showing you at your best. In summary, most people do not have a portfolio. Most professional developers and testers do not have portfolio projects. They barely have GitHub repos. So it's not required to get a job. And if you chose to create one, I think it's a good idea, but it has to show you at your best. Otherwise, it might detract. Yes, a portfolio is showcasing your skills. If it showcases your skills as lacking, then it's doing the job. It's just not the job that you want it to do. So that's why we add in the README. This is a learning project. This is what I learned. This is what I've still got to do. And most people are not going to read it or look at it anyway. But for the right role, with the right recruiter, if it's good enough, it could make a massive difference because no one does this. So you be in the 1% of applicants who have something that showcases your skill set in the tools and techniques and technologies that they're looking for, and it's up to date and it looks good. So you are elevated beyond the other people. Assuming that the recruitment process is good, which is not a guarantee. And I'm not trying to put you off because I have loads of repos. Most of them are not portfolio showcase because they're personal projects. My blogs are typically the showcase and portfolio that I have. But I'm certainly not trying to put you off because I have loads of repos. I make most of my stuff public. It's really good for your personal and professional development in general. Getting used to sharing things, being comfortable, showing people that you don't know everything, that you make mistakes, I think is a useful skill to have, particularly as you go up in seniority. A lot of people think as you go up in seniority, you make fewer mistakes and that you know more stuff. Really what we do is we help draw the knowledge out of other people and help build up the knowledge in other people so we don't have to know it all ourselves. And our portfolios can communicate that. So best of luck. If you do create portfolios, I'd love for you to let me know, put links in comments or whatever. But if it's a portfolio, it better be good. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to subscribe wherever videos and podcasts are subscribable.